friends, the Set Free Virtual Summit is here. Now you may ask me, what's it all about? What's in it for me? There's 30 minutes of sharing from champions around the globe who will share their unique life experiences with us and what led them to perfect freedom. This summit is inspired by the writings of St. John Paul II and is about the desires of our hearts, our friendships, our relationships, and the quality of life that we all aspire for. We often think we know ourselves, but there's much more to love and to life. My team and I wish to welcome you to the Set Free Virtual Summit. Be blessed, friends, and be set free.
Hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Sacasa, and I'm truly honored to be part of this Theology of the Body virtual conference in India. I'm coming from New Orleans, Louisiana, all the way on the other side of the world. So grateful for technology and having this opportunity to be able to share a message with you that I hope really blesses and informs you in some way. I am a marriage and family therapist who integrates his faith within my work. And what that means is that as a counselor, I work with people in troubled relationships, trying to help restore their marriage, or if they do fall apart, that hopefully we can help them to divorce amicably. But our desire certainly is to be able to help individuals restore their relationship, and using whatever latest tips and tools and techniques that are available to us from evidence-based methods. We certainly want to be able to help people to achieve the best relationship that they have. Now, as a Catholic therapist, I also integrate my faith with my work, which means that I anchor my understanding of marriage and of the human person on the Catholic vision of humanity and relationships. And so this conference that you are attending right now, this ongoing formation, is on John Paul II's Theology of the Body. And I have studied JP2's Theology of the Body and have tried to integrate it within my own marriage. My wife and I, we've been married for 17 years. We have 4 beautiful sons. And I've tried my life's purpose is to be able to communicate this in a way that integrates both the theology and the science that I was just speaking about. And so I've been asked to give 2 presentations. This first one that I will be talking about is related to masculinity and how to understand masculinity from a theology of the body lens. And then a second presentation, which will follow this one, on pornography and really the dangers of pornographic use among young adults and youth and really pretty much anybody. So porn's not a good idea for you. So we'll talk about that just in a little bit. So let's talk about masculinity. Well, John Paul II's vision of the theology of the body, really what it's doing is that it's putting human relationships at the center of creation, if we can really go that far, and to say that then that the relationship between men and women is of the utmost importance. He goes far as to say that it is not so much in times of isolation individually that I image God, but when I'm in communion with another, and more specifically, when I'm in relationship with another person. When men are in relationship with women and women in relationship with men, it is in those relationships, in communion with the opposite sex, that together we really image who God is, because as human persons, we are made in the image and likeness of God. That means then that there is an inherent complementarity between men and women. We could talk about this in the context of friendship, but even more so in romance, and even more so then in the context of marriage. Marriage as being the supreme human relationship, where the fullness of a man is integrated with the fullness of a woman, and that together they have sacramentally forged and bonded their love in a way that brings Christ's grace into their relationship, into their union, and then outgrowing from that, it comes children, comes fruitfulness, comes evangelization, comes holiness, all the good stuff that it comes out of lifelong relationships, lifelong marriage, that is. But let's just take a step back. So JP2 says that in the Theology of the Body here, that it's in relationship that we image God more profoundly. So that means that me as a man am just part of the image, and a woman is just part of the image, and that we can't exalt one over the other. We can't say that women are better than men or that men are better than women. That together there is a certain complementarity. There is a what's the word? A complement, like two pieces of a puzzle that tend to fit together. We can't be too rigid and say, well, then women have to act a certain way and that's it, and then men have to act a certain way and that's it. No, we're not, JP2 isn't speaking about gender stereotypes and saying that women have to be a certain way, men have to, no. But nevertheless, we're speaking about, at least theologically or theoretically, we can conceptualize that there is a certain complement between the two. And so we're going to be focusing on what the male side of this, the masculine side of this is. See, masculinity tends to be defined through the superhero mentality. Yeah, I'm going to go in, I'm going to kill the bad guy, shoot him up, be the hero, save the day, I'm the man, everything's great, awesome. Now, who doesn't love that vision? I mean, I certainly do. I'm a big fan of Marvel superhero movies. I've watched them all. I love seeing Spider-Man come in and kick some, bad guy booty, and Captain America with his awesome shield going and crushing the bad guys. That's it. Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man doing his thing. Everybody freaking loves that. I love it. Those movies made bazillions of dollars for a reason. Everybody loves watching the good guys kill the bad guys. The problem is that, being the superhero in and of itself isn't what fully defines one's masculinity. I can't define my masculinity solely based on how much money I make, how successful I am in giving presentations, how successful I am as a therapist. I mean, all those things are great, and they're part of what God has, imbibed in my heart as a way to be able to express his goodness and to evangelize, which is wonderful. But at the end of the day, God isn't going to ask me, he is going to ask me how I've used all my gifts. But the way he's going to ask me isn't how I use these gifts for my own gain or for even helping others in ministry. While certainly that's part of it. The thing is that I'm not married to this camera that I'm staring at right now or this microphone that I'm speaking into. I'm not married to the clients that I see, that I help in counseling. I'm not married to anybody who listens to my podcast or listens to my talks. I'm grateful to have the opportunity and the skill set of communication to be able to help others, for sure. Yes, that is true. That is a talent that God has given to me. But at the end of the day, if I am not attentive to my wife and to my kids, all of these other things, while good they may be, are folly, are nonsense, are nothing without a firm foundation of love. See, what the Lord is going to ask me first and foremost is, how did I love my wife? How did I love my kids? Because it's there that the fullness of my masculinity emerges. It's in the love of my wife and my kids that all the talents that I have, am I using those to make my wife a better person? She's already pretty good, so it's pretty easy on my part. But am I receiving her love also to make me a better person? Now that's the tougher exchange, because I can be a little bit of a bonehead sometimes. But nevertheless, being able to say, okay, God has given me all these gifts and these talents, and I have to use these first and foremost to be able to love my wife the way that she deserves. Why? Well, because she deserves it. But two, because as I said earlier, that if I believe what JP2 said, that it's in communion that we more adequately image God, then it's together with my wife in the union that we form and the love that we have and the sacrament that we have instituted, that it's through that I'm able to then experience God's grace in a particular way, and then being able to share that grace outwardly. And the first beneficiaries of that sacramental grace are our children, who are formed and created within this love. So as a husband, I give my love to my bride then receives that love, and out of that love comes forth children. And together, as mother and as father, we have the task of being able to raise our kids. So God then says, all right, be a good steward of the gifts he's given to me. Awesome. How do I use these gifts? I can use these gifts for a lot of different things. Some very good, but what's the one great thing that I can use these gifts for? Love my wife, love my kids. If I love my wife well, if I give my kids the security that they need to be able to be raised in an environment that encourages them and challenges them and forms them and shapes them and teaches them of the faith, teaches them how to love, teaches them how to be productive members of society, then I've done my job. That's it. That's the task that God has put before me. Everything else is gravy. Everything else. But again, back to this notion of complement. If I use these gifts for my wife and my kids, then I also need to be able to receive what it is that she brings to the table. Because God has tasked her with the same challenge. How is she going to love me? How is she going to be able to love our kids together? Through her own imagination, through her own personality, through her own skill set, through her own uniqueness as a woman. I also approach the same task with my own skill set, my own personality, my own demeanor, my own individuality, who I am as a man. And then together as woman and as a man, that we're able to then show God's love to the world. That's the theology of the body. That's it. This is why marriage is under attack. This is why sexual morality is under attack, because as soon as we pull away from the complement of the sexes and we say that sex is just about pleasure, or it's just about gratification, or it's just about, anything really, or that life is really just about career advancement, the life is just about money, the life is just about being the superhero at the end of the day, then all those things are pulling away from what God has intended. And what God has intended is that men and women love each other with tenderness, with intensity, with dedication, with focus. And that if we do this well, everything else will fall into place. If we can love one another the way that God has intended us to love one another, I promise you, everything else will fall into place. Okay. So my wife has her piece of the equation, and I have my piece of the equation. So what does it mean then to be a man married to a woman raising kids? Well, I could say wholeheartedly that men and women are different. That's just what it is. We're together. Even JP2 speaks about this. Our primary image before the Lord, our primary identity before God is that of human person. We're human. Yes, we are both human. My wife is a human person. She's not from Venus. I'm not from Mars. We're both from planet Earth. We came from the same place, and we're both human creatures. And together we worship God with our consciousness, with our personalities, with the fullness of who we are. Give that all back to the Lord. Animals don't do that. All right. So we're not animals, but we are human. But then even in our humanity, we have shared humanity, but then there's also a difference within that. Within her body, there are two X chromosomes touching every single cell in her body. Within my body, there's an X and a Y chromosome impacting every aspect of my body. So that brings some differences. When you look at men and women's brains, about 85 to 90% of them are the same. You look at a man's brain and a woman's brain, 85 to 90% is about the same. But that leaves about 10 to 15% where there is a difference. So again, 10 to 15% doesn't seem like a whole lot, but it is to some degree. It does impact the way that men and women interact in the world, feel things, the way we measure time, the way we experience temperature, all these different things, the way we conceptualize, the way that we think, the way that we organize things, how aggressive, how passive we are, how attentive we are to relationships, how attentive we are to goal setting. All of these things play out across the differences between men and women. So let me share a quick story here. All right. So like I said, we have 4 boys. My oldest son is 16. And the first time that I really came to understand how different we were as men and women, or particularly me and my wife, Kristen and I, we got married relatively young. I was 22, she was 21. And we had Gabriel, our first son, when we were both 23, 24. So just a couple years into our relationship, pretty early on. So we were pretty young. I was crazy in that I had my oldest son, and then 5 weeks later, I started grad school. Not advised, to do 2.5 years of master's education with a stay-at-home wife and a child. Yeah, not the best idea, but hey, we did it. There's a reason why you see some gray hairs kind of hang around in there, because I've done some crazy things in my life. But Kristen and I, nevertheless, we did this. So we moved to a new city in another part of the country when Gabriel was just 3 weeks old, after we baptized him in the community that we were living in before. Moved to North Carolina, and I'm starting my graduate studies. So we're there. It's just the two of us. Nobody else is around. We're getting to know the community, learning new people. She has to stay at home, obviously, because the child is really young, and I'm starting grad school, and that means I'm away from the house most days. A couple months into our stay in North Carolina, Kristen's done a wonderful job just raising our son, and he's just about 3 or 4 months at this point, I would say. Well, there's one day where I was able to get a little bit of a break from work and from school, and I was home. And so I wanted to be able to give Kristen an opportunity just to kind of have a little bit of time off. So Gabriel's asleep. It's the middle of the afternoon, and she needs to go run out to the grocery store to go get some items. And the grocery store literally is like across the street where we live in an apartment complex. Here's the apartment complex. Here's the parking lot, and then really right over here on the other side is the grocery store. Gabriel's asleep 3 or 4 months, no problem. I can take care of this, no big deal. So I said, Kristen, why don't you just go run to the grocery store, go get the things they need to get, go take a little bit of time for yourself, no big deal. It's going to be okay. Just leave him, let him be. And when I proposed this to my wife, when I said, why don't you just leave him alone with me for a little bit, her mouth was like she got offended that I would say such a thing. And I was like, what are you I'm the boy's father. If you can't trust me, who can you trust? I was so offended by the fact that she wouldn't just leave and go take a little bit of time by herself, have some quiet, and that she wouldn't leave me alone with the child. So I got really offended by this, and we started getting defensive, and so we got into a little bit of disagreement. Well, see, years later, when I was processing this interaction that we had, I realized how unbelievable it really was for me to make such a claim. See, I don't know what it was like to have this child inside of my body. You know what I mean? I don't know what that feels like. I mean, I've had bubbles and gas at times inside of me. That's about the extent of what I can compare having a child to, and that's not even close. But to feel a child grow inside of you and to move and then to feel this child come to some sense of maturity and to push this child out of your body. And then for 3 months later, for me to be like, hey, why don't you just leave this child alone with me for 3 months? That's not for 3 months, leave this child alone for me for 30 minutes. That was basically me saying hey, why don't you just cut off your arm and leave it here, put it under ice, and I'll be happy to watch that limb for you. And then when you come back, I'll be gracious to reattach the limb. That's basically what I was asking my wife to do. So, because that's the way she felt and interprets, of course, what it meant to be that connected with a child. So that right there is just a completely different frame of reference, right? Men and women, we have some differences in terms of the way that we approach things. And this was clearly one of them. Now, of course, Kristen has grown and the children have grown, and we've all been able to laugh about, her and I, we've been able to laugh about this a little bit. And she recognized, obviously, that even her, and it was a little bit ridiculous, to be as defensive as she was. But nevertheless, I realized right then and there that there is a difference between us. And so I had to be a little bit more sensitive to the fact that there was a difference between us, and that I needed to do that. So, we speak about the differences between men and women, and there's a lot of different ways that men and women do manifest these differences. And one of the other ways that men and women manifest difference, not just in the way that we relate to our children, but that's a big one, is in the way that we certainly relate to others. We talk about when we see individuals be hurt or upset, we want to respond with kindness. We want to respond with compassion. We want to respond with empathy. But even in the ways that men and women respond empathetically to individuals tends to be a little bit different. Michael Gurian, who is a researcher on these topics related to men and women and the differences between the two of them, he frames it this way. He says that women tend to display what's called a nurturing empathy. So think of it like this. Let's say you're playing some soccer, or you see a bunch of kids playing soccer. If there's a little boy who's on a co-ed team, boys and girls playing in the team, the boy falls down, midfielder, hurts his foot, he whatever, twists his ankle because he was running so fast and didn't kick the ball right. He's on the ground, he's rolling, he's like, oh man, my leg really hurts. What do I do? The girls will typically on the team will come by him and be like, hey, it's okay, just relax, stay down, just wait till it passes over. That's a fair response. That's called a nurturing empathy, where you're understanding, you're compassionate of the pain, and you want to be able to meet the person in the pain, and you want to be able to help the individual just kind of not feel alone in the midst of that pain. Beautiful. That's great. What Michael Gurian says is that if you were to look at the boys on the team, the way that they would respond to that one boy who was hurt with the injury is what he refers to as an aggressive empathy, which seems kind of funny when he frames it that way. But an aggressive empathy is that the boys will come over and be like, they'll recognize that the kid's in pain. It's like, hey man, I know that you're hurting right now, but what we really need you to do is we need you to get up because we need you to be part of the team. We need you to get up because this team can't function without you. And so what the boys will do is that even though they recognize that there is a pain, the get up, we need you, that evokes a certain response out of the boy that says, I'm willing to put aside my pain. I know that they recognize that I'm hurting, but this call, this need to be part of something larger than myself, this soccer team, is really what's going to allow me to overcome this pain. So in both situations, there still is an acknowledgement that there was a hurt, but tends to be a difference in the way that men and women respond to that pain. Both have their place, do they not? I mean, there's certainly times and circumstances when a more nurturing empathy is absolutely the response. But there are certainly times when you can imagine that a more encouraging, a more compelling, a more aggressive empathy is something that is necessary as well. So again, we always have to have the tension between both of them. Another story that I'll share with regards to that. A few years ago, when I completed my doctorate, I told the kids, because my kids were so great and so patient with me while I was doing my doctoral studies, that I said, listen, guys, when we finish it, we're going to go on this big family summer vacation. We're going to go out west. We're going to go to the Rocky Mountains, huge mountain chain here in America. And I said, we're going to spend a week out there. We're going to go camping. We're going to go just awesome time. And so we did. The last day that we were out in the Rocky Mountains, we took this beautiful hike to a glacier. And the glacier, St. Mary's Glacier, also has St. Mary's Lake right next to it. Now, St. Mary's Lake is basically the glacier water that has melted just enough to form a big pond. Now, if you've ever left ice out in a cup, you know that even though it's not frozen, it's still pretty cold. So this water was probably about 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Sorry, I'm American. I don't know what that is Celsius. We're just going to talk just a few degrees right above freezing, whatever that is. Freezing is what, 0 degrees Celsius? Sorry, maybe like 5, 10 degrees. I don't know. I'm sorry. I shouldn't be even saying this because I don't really know what I'm talking about. But anyways, it was really cold. That's the point I'm trying to make. So we get to this lake. And on the other side of the lake, there were some individuals who were jumping off a cliff that was probably about 25 feet up. Again, I'm sorry. Someone do the conversion for me. If one of the presenters, other facilitators can help me out, that would be awesome. But I don't know what that is in terms of meters. At 25 feet, I don't know. I'm not even going to bother. I'm sorry. Now I'm all distracted. So anyways, but the cliff was not ridiculously high. It was high enough that when you jumped off of it, you have that. If you ever jumped off something that high, you have this one fleeting moment where you're like, I should have hit the ground by now. Like I should have hit the water by now. And then you hit the water. It was kind of like that. So it wasn't like anything crazy, but it was high enough where you fell. Anyways, you know what I'm saying. So we're seeing these kids jump off the cliff. And so my boys, who at that time were like 8, 12, 14, somewhere in that ballpark, were really excited because they saw the kids jumping off and they wanted to be able to jump off as well. So I was like, all right, guys, this is a great opportunity for us to face our fears. Let's go do this. So we walk around the lake, go to the cliff where we see everybody else jumping off. I go first because I'm the dad. That's what I'm supposed to do. Excuse me. And then we go in order. So then my oldest son goes, the second son goes, and then the third son is up there. He's up on the cliff by himself. And he's just staring out at this thing. And he's in his head. He's probably about 7 years old at this time. And he's just like, so for like at 7, he's like half of me. So however big I thought the cliff was, it's like double. Because if you've ever gone back to things that you remember from a childhood, there were plenty of things from my childhood. I was like, man, that lake was huge. And I'd go back to it like now as an adult. I'm like, oh, it wasn't really that big. So put yourself back in the mind of a 7-year-old. So 25-foot cliff for me was pretty big. But for him, it's like, who knows, like 75 feet or whatever it is. So he's staring at this thing, rightfully so, and getting in his head, should I do it? Should I not do it? And so we're encouraging him. We're like, come on, bud, just jump straight out. No problem. I'll come get you. You're fine. You're not going to get hurt. The water's deep enough. Just go ahead and jump straight out. So my boy jumps out, goes into the water, and he swims across. Beautiful. Fantastic. Now, the reason that I share this story is that because me as his dad, I was there to try to encourage him to push himself beyond what he felt comfortable doing. That's a good thing. That's the role of the man. I really believe that. If a woman's tendency, and not all women, so generally speaking, but this is what we tend to see, back to the aggressive empathy versus nurturing empathy, that if women tend to want to move towards taking care, nurturing, protecting, minimizing risk, men tend to want to push the boundaries and want to encourage just that, a pushing of the boundaries, a little bit of aggressiveness, figure things out. It's going to be okay. suck it up, walk it off, that type of attitude, that's okay. So we need, we need both of this nurturing and this kind of aggressiveness. So here, my son, he could have stepped off, and I wouldn't have loved him any less. I wouldn't have changed my opinion of him. But he needed the experience of jumping off the cliff for his own sense of self, so that he could feel that he's mastered some degree of his own anxiety, that he's been able to jump off and live to tell the story. Many of us, we feel that in our own lives. We wonder, why does God allow us to suffer? Why does God push us forward? Why is the Father, who supposedly loves us, moves us on? Well, because sometimes God the Father, operating within that masculine, God is both masculine and feminine, both together we image God the Father, but sometimes that masculine dimension does emerge, and the reason that God does that, the reason God pushes us, is because we need to be able to develop that confidence within ourselves. We need to be able to push ourselves sometimes to go past our fears, to go past the things, and really that's the role of the Father, is there to provide safety, security, a bubble, an understanding of saying, okay, here's a good place where you can push yourself. So with my son, jumps off the cliff. I knew he was safe. I knew he was in his head. I knew nothing bad was going to happen to him. And I was right there. But he needed to be able to overcome that fear on his own. So he does. Swims off. He feels great. Feels like a champ, like $1 million. He's awesome. Fantastic. Fast forward a few months down the line, we start getting into First Communion preparation, because that was the year that he was then preparing for First Communion. And my son, at that point, really had a lot of anxiety when it came to going to the class. I don't know, he didn't really connect well with the teacher. She was nice, but could be a little bit gruff sometimes and not really understanding. And anyways, he ended up feeling a lot of anxiety about going to First Communion classes. And so we would sit down, we would tell him, I said, listen, bud, remember the time that you jumped off the cliff? And he said, yeah. And I said, remember how you felt really anxious that you were going to jump off the cliff? And he said, yeah, Dad, I remember. I said, well, big guy, when you jumped off the cliff I knew that you were fine. And I would never have put you in a situation, even though you felt afraid, I would never put you in a situation where you genuinely would have been in harm's way. But I know I needed you to be able to overcome your own fear about it so that you can feel more confident. And I said, it's the same thing here when it comes to this class. I'm not going to put you in a place where you're going to feel where you're going to be in a real harm. I know that you are anxious. I know that you're nervous, but I would never put you in a place where you would feel genuine harm or genuine threat to your life. And so I need you, bud, to trust me and to trust that your mom and I, we love you very much, and we would never put you in a situation where you would genuinely be hurt. And so he got it. He got the message, and he was able to make the connection between him overcoming his fear in Colorado over that summer, and then that fall going into these First Communion classes and being able to put those things together. That's the role of a dad. See, more than being a superhero, more than giving these lectures or any of those things, it's that I'm present for these moments in my children's life so that I can form them and shape them and to be able to navigate whatever fears that they have in their life, to be able to push past them appropriately so. My wife, then, we complement one another, because there's sometimes where I really want to push hard, and sometimes she says, not so much, you need to step back. And I'm like, okay, no problem. And so, but I trust her, and sometimes I let her take the lead on these conversations, and sometimes I have to take the lead. And again, we exist in this complement. So the role of being a man, the purpose, of being a man, far more than making a lot of money, far more than being rich and famous, far more than being the greatest superhero possible or being the best athlete possible, the role of every man is how he loves his wife and his children. That's it. That's it. That's the lens of the theology of the body. The greatest thing that I can be as a man is a father, and to be able to live my fatherhood the way that God lives his, so that I can be the face of the Father to my children. Now, I fail. I'm a sinner. I don't have it all together. But I believe at the end of the day that even in the midst of that God still is operating through me. So, in the lens of the theology of the body, the purpose of being a man is to be a dad. That's it. In relationship to my wife and in relationship to my kids. And men who are listening to this, take this call very seriously, because when we start talking about pornography here in a few minutes, we're going to speak about threats against your father, threats against your husbandhood, threats against your masculinity. All of these things at the end of the day, they're sinful, pull you away from that one great standard that God has for you, that one great call that God has for you, which is to love as he loves. So be the men that God is inviting you to be. Love the women in your lives And hopefully God will guide you and shape you and form you so that you can be the best husband and the best father that you could possibly be. And don't get me wrong, that's in the natural sense, but for those of you who call it a priesthood or even religious life, that's also in the supernatural sense. Every man is called to be a dad, just like every woman is called to be a mother. That's where we find our fulfillment, because that's where we give ourselves completely to the great mission that God has for us. All right. So thank you guys for this time. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you in the next lecture. God bless.